The philosophy of eternal recurrence is not just complicated, chaotic, difficult, and dangerous in itself, and also for the most people and the readers in and around the world and in distinctive societies, but eternal recurrence actually has also always been the most haunting thought experiment of and by the German philosopher of much provocation, influence, and importance, Friedrich Nietzsche. So, obviously, eternal recurrence can be very easily considered to be not only a timeless philosophical hammer that is complex, chaotic, perplexing, that just obviously forces and provokes the readers as well as everyone else around the world to think very hard, but it is also the most haunting thought experiment. It has been considered at least in that way, and it certainly has been that way because obviously eternal recurrence refers to the endless loop and the endless repetition of events and sufferings and struggles, pains, achievements, conquests, successes, and essentially everything else that's life, that's involved and within life, and also in our lives repeats, recurs, and happens over and over and over again without any halt, without any prevention, without actually any explanation or clear description to us. Life just moves on. So obviously, it's not just the blind unconscious force that life itself is, but obviously the universe is the endless repetition of life cycles, one after another, alongside living organisms and human beings that obviously come into being and then die, and this cycle never really stops. And so does suffering, pain, torment, struggle never comes to an end because there is no end to life. There is obviously going to be life. Now, this is not really pessimism, and this is neither a scientific nor cosmic theory, but this is a thought experiment as to question ourselves, to interrogate our abilities, inabilities, limits, weaknesses, shortcomings, merits, etc., and to obviously question our own integrity, character, authenticity, and to basically re examine, reevaluate ourselves, our talents, our abilities, our virtues, ideas over and over and over again, not just for reform, improvement, betterment in our lives, but also for the constant self overcoming, for the constant triumphing over of the ego, and by the ego, for the overall improvement, progress, growth, learning of the individual man and woman in the world. So it's about self conquest and also the ability to accept life as it is and to embrace fate. Because if we do not embrace fate, then we're going to invite unnecessary suffering, chaos, torment, friction into our lives. We're going to suffer almost unreasonably because of our deniability, refusability of fate, because of our resistance against it. When we should embrace it, we should be able to move alongside and with the currents of life and the rivers of circumstances, situations, conditions that abound, that make life difficult, complicated, chaotic. But then again, these are external forces also that makes life meaningful, worthwhile, significant anyways, because if we do not have resistance and difficulty, danger, chaos in our lives coming from both external circumstances, outside directions, and public, obviously, conditions, and also from within ourselves, then what is life all about? What would even be the meaning, progress, ambition of life if there is no resistance, if there is no suffering in it from both the external world and also from within ourselves? So, obviously, ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to learn to accept life for what it is as it represents to us, that it does not have some inherent meaning and predestined virtue by itself. Life is fundamentally, inherently, naturally devoid of meaning, ambition, purpose, aim, intention, character, but it's always our movement, motion, activity, action, engagement, involvement into life, in our character, progress, learning, succession, friction that obviously creates, develops, and gives birth to meaning, reason, purpose to continue moving forward, to continue making mistakes, to continue learning something or another, because that's what life is, and that is what also eternal recurrence tries to say to us, and it tries to teach us exactly that which we refuse all the time by engaging and involving ourselves in addiction, pleasure, attention, approval, validation, money, fame all the time. But again, all these external possessions and outside achievements are not only unreasonable, but they are also conditional and worthless and transient and dependent upon the others' approval and acknowledgement and not upon ourselves. So we have to become the ultimate masters of ourselves. We have to become the Übermensch, as is already popularized by Nietzsche. We have to be the creator of our own ideals, values, virtues, and that fits our character, that helps in our elevation as a human being, our improvement in success, and our overall enhancement as obviously minds, entities, and individualities. And our values, virtues, philosophy should not and must not come from societal circumstances, public premises, cultures, religions, or any other external obstacle, authority, arbitrariness of any kind, because that ruins everything. That obviously makes us slave morality. But we have to develop, practice, and become master morality and the Superman and the will to power and the eternal recurrence. Then life will automatically find meaning and continue with meaning, worthwhileness, significance, distinction, individuality in one way or another without needing to struggle. Because obviously, when we accept, embrace struggle and the despair of existence, the meaninglessness of life, and obviously approve of the absurdism, then everything falls into place. Everything certainly again starts making sense, meaning, and reason to us because of our acceptability and basically approval of all that life is, that is suffering, chaos, torment, trouble, currents, and also worthlessness, meaninglessness, futility, etc., and also emptiness. So then we can start building ourselves all over again, and from the beginning, we can do essentially everything else because life ultimately is going to continue, and it's going to continue with the same kinds of patterns and sufferings, actions, habits, betrayals that we have suffered, that have been imposed upon us, that we have experienced in one way or another. All those things are always going to be there. They're always going to continue to happen in one way or another with subtle differences and minor changes and in different circumstances. But the pain, circumstance, compulsion, event are going to be similar. They are going to resemble the one another. That is what Nietzsche has said, and he has consistently tried to set in his philosophies and also through eternal recurrence, that life is the endless repetition and loop of what it is and what has already happened, and what will happen will also be the one that is already happening or that has already happened. So the only way to deal with this misery and repetition is to embrace the fate, love the life as it is individually and also generally. And then we're going to become not just successful, purposeful, ambitious, meaningful, but we're going to turn and transform ourselves into absolutely invincible, unflinching, unstoppable, indisputable, obviously men and women. And that is what he tries to make us into, the Übermensch, the self-governing, self-responsible, self-relating, and obviously self-independent, self-disciplined, self-knowledgeable man that does things everything by himself for himself and not for the society. He lives for himself without the burden of basically religion, education, morality, culture of any kind, because morality ultimately constricts thinking and takes our ability to be ourselves, to think for ourselves, and to do for ourselves. So obviously eternal recurrence is also known as eternal return in philosophical thought experiment popularized by the 19th century German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. And at its core, it posits that the universe and all events within it, including our entire life, repeat infinitely in an exact cyclical loop. Every joy, every pain, every trivial moment would occur again and again, forever, without any variation. This isn't presented as a scientific or cosmological theory, but as a profound existential challenge. So obviously, the fundamental point of this philosophy is not just the revelation of the repetition of events, traumas, pains, torments, suffering, sadnesses in the human life over and over again, but is the fundamental question as to whether or not we're going to accept all this, or we're just going to quit living at all. We're just going to kill ourselves, or basically because of burden, responsibility, suffering, an endless loop of pain, betrayal, corruption, hopelessness? Are we going to slide or drive ourselves into the abyss of either consciously or unconsciously nihilism, atheism, Marxism, and other fundamentally dangerous types of ideas that again strips all meaning of life that is also there, that could have been there, that we could have done and made possible by ourselves through our actions, ideologies, behaviors, that is gone when we become nihilists and atheists. So the point is not becoming atheism or turning to atheism and nihilism, but to accept existence as it is, the darkness, mystery of existence that could never be resolved, no understood fully, absolutely by anyone in the world. That is what makes life so interesting and worth trying, worth exploring, worth having ambitions, meanings, one after the another. So not only are we going to have to try to develop ourselves, seek growth, progress, learning, but also conquer, reform, overcome ourselves, our will, ourself over and over and over again, and again create, develop, grow new ambitions, desires, potentials, aims, intentions, purposes that keeps life meaningful, worthwhile, and that gives us a reason to continue forward, to continue making mistakes, and to find higher realms or meanings that obviously makes pain transcendent and universal, and by which we're able to connect our souls directly with the cosmos, with the universe. So it's about the acceptance of existence and the embracement of life exactly as it is, without any force, compulsion, coercion, or without even trying to change anything, or without even trying to force ourselves into life, but then again moving alongside it, moving with its currents, beauties, and authenticities that even makes something as meaningless, as futile, as empty as life also seem very meaningful, significant, authentic, worthwhile, trustworthy, distinct, sovereign, etc. So obviously, if this thing always repeats, if the repetition is always going to be there in the future also, for as long as there is life upon the planet and the world, then what are we going to do? Are we going to quit or stop trying for good, or are we going to just move forward with basically sufferings of life? Now, it's about parting ways with suffering, but not parting ways with yourself. It's about parting ways with that and those people that no longer respect us, serve us, admire us for who we are, what we represent, for our values. It's about basically absolutely being done with unnecessary kind of suffering, unreasonable chaos, people, ideas, pains, sorrows, torments that obviously degrades us and degenerates us in our thought, learning, vitality, growth, idea, etc. And embracing only that type of suffering that elevates us on the trajectory of the human being. Only embracing, approving of that type of pain that makes us ultimately not only the Ubermensch, but also into something that's absolutely unbeatable, undefeatable, unflinching, invincible for the others as well as for the self. So obviously, Nietzsche first encountered the idea in ancient sources such as the Stoics and pre-Socratic philosophers like Heraclitus, but he transformed it into a cornerstone of his philosophy. And this idea can be primarily found as abstracts and crumbs in his books, The Gay Science and Thus Spoke Zarathustra, whereby he develops characters that suffer from not only suffering, struggle, pain, torment, rejection, hollowness, emptiness, but also from the repetition of those sufferings that obviously drains them, that they want freedom from. But then again, what are they going to do inevitably? Are they going to accept everything as it is without force, coercion, compulsion? Or basically, are they going to just try to change everything and adapt everything in their image, ego, desire, comfort, relaxation, and ruin themselves and basically drive themselves into the abyss of depression, atheism, nihilism in the process, only to realize and find out that nothing could ever be changed, that nothing can be changed, but only oneself. Only we can elevate ourselves in our growth, progress, learning. We can reform, change, adapt ourselves in changing circumstances, situations, nature for our consistency. And also, when it comes to deeper implications and interpretations, then this method can also be used as a psychological tool, not literal belief. Nietzsche wasn't advocating eternal recurrence as a factual prediction, but instead it's a hammer to smash complacency, encouraging all of us to live with intensity and without resentment toward the past or future. By imagining infinite repetition, we strip away excuses like, obviously, we're going to fix it next time. So, obviously, it's neither about hate nor resentment towards anyone or anything, but it's absolute, pure devotion towards fate, acceptance, approval of fate, destiny, and ultimate love for life, for one's life, and for also life in general, because it's only the ups and downs, struggles, pains, torments, rejections, betrayals that life unfolds as, and that it offers and provides us with, and that we also experience and encounter. Exactly and precisely those things makes our lives worth living, individual, significant, sovereign, distinct, and independent, and different from the others that are addicted to, obsessed with pleasure, relaxation, acceptance, approval, validation, entertainment, all the time. Because all those things that they seek, that they have, that they possess, are not only external to them, to their desire, will, control, but also highly conditional and transient and worthless anyways, because these are external possessions and honors, and honor cannot be dignity until and unless it's deserved by the person. So obviously honor does not consist in possessing more and more, but in deserving all of it. And when we deserve everything that we own, then that becomes dignity. So obviously it's a hammer that forces us to think, that obviously also compels us to accept life as it is, to move with the flow of life without entertaining or developing any hate, envy, resentment, comparison, frustration for ourselves or for anyone else in the world, because that does not give us anything. Resentment, hate, ruins our own soul, corrupts our mind, infiltrates our psychic clarity, purity, and takes away everything that we already are and that we could also have become, achieved, grown in our lives because of our actions, because of our consistency, on the basis of our individuality, talent. All that is taken away. And obviously, when it comes to connection to Nietzsche's broader philosophy, then obviously eternal recurrence ties into his critique of nihilism, the belief that life is meaningless after the death of God. Eternal recurrence encounters this by demanding us to create our own meaning. It's linked to the Overmensch, the Overman who joyfully affirms the eternal cycle, and to the will of power where life is an endless becoming rather than a linear march toward an end. So obviously even after the end and the basically eradication, neutralization, elimination of all religious faith and superior meaning and greater entities and sources of faith and obviously philosophy in the world, then also we can continue even in this age of nihilism, mediocrity, stupidity, ignorance, as they are already worshipped by the majority, by the masses in the societies around the world. We can still be individual. We can still live for ourselves, think for ourselves, do for ourselves, make our own rules, regulations, values, virtues. If we can become the Übermensch, if we can become what the others will never become or what we are afraid of becoming, and that is not nihilistic, neither nihilism nor atheism, but the acceptance of life, the overman, the eternal recurrence, the will to power, the ability to create everything by ourselves, for ourselves, and of ourselves, that is going to basically make us individual and invincible and unflinching, unflappable, unstoppable, and indisputable under any circumstances and situations and conditions, no matter the kind of pain, torment, struggle we experience, we overcome, or that's been mounted against us by the others, by the masses. Still we will survive. We will see life as a constant process of overcoming and becoming, and obviously newness, and not as a linear line of mediocrity, ignorance, arrogance, nihilism, or basically something that's just about addiction, pleasure, entertainment, because that's not how life works. And historical context, this concept echoes ancient ideas like the Pythagorean notion of cosmic cycles, and or Hindu Buddhist concepts of samsara, though Nietzsche's version is more individualistic and non-mystical. Modern thinkers from Albert Camus to Gilles Deleuze have reinterpreted it as a call to ethical vitality. So obviously, eternal recurrence has its own problems, difficulties, chaos, complications, challenges that had to be met, that had to understand. But at its core, at its foundation, what it says is not only absolutely correct, but also is worth experiencing, embracing, accepting in our lives. That life is the endless repetition of misery, pain, torment that has already happened before, that is also going to happen in the future and continue to happen in cycles. We cannot even imagine the present because we're deluded, because we're delusional, we're pleasure driven animals, we're addicted to comfort, relaxation, pleasure, pride, vanity, arrogance, and fame all the time. And without these, we cannot live. Without exposure, we feel empty. But then again, this is a challenge to all that.